The Book Collector Extraordinaire, a glimpse into the life and work of A.S.W. Rosenbach. Origins and Ascendants, 1876–1920. 1. The Birth of a Book-Mad Boy, 1876–1890. Philadelphia, 22nd of July, 1876. Barely 2 months after the United States celebrated its centennial, Isabella Pollock Rosenbach delivered her youngest of 8 children in a modest row house on South 6th Street. The infant was registered as Abraham Simon Wolfe Rosenbach, but in family law he would forever be Aby. His father, Morris, a Bavarian immigrant who had reinvented himself as a maker of men's undergarments, believed the boy might one day become a rabbi or lawyer. Books were respected in the Rosenbach household because they were the instruments of social mobility for Jews in post-Civil War America, yet they were not collectibles. Wikipedia. The books my father kept were for use, Rosenbach later recalled. Their broken backs smelled of soap and shirt factory musk. The remark, although preserved only in a nephew's memoir, captures the chasm Aby would cross, from utilitarian pages to priceless rarities. An uncle's magical shop. A few blocks away, Aby's maternal uncle Moses Pollock presided over a dim, dusty storefront whose crooked sign read, "Old books bought and sold, fine bindings a specialty." The boy began running errands there at 9, dusting folios taller than himself, absorbing the argot of juice, points, and perfect copies. By 11, he spent his allowance on an illustrated Reynard the Fox, the earliest purchase he proudly catalogued on homemade index cards. The Institute of English Studies. Pollock delighted in testing the prodigy. One Saturday he handed Aby a battered pamphlet, Samuel Johnson's Prologue, 1747. "Would you stake your week's pennies on it, lad?" Young Rosenbach gulped and nodded. He paid 75 cents, carried the pamphlet home trembling, and soon read in a reference work that only a handful of copies survived. Within a year he refused an offer of $5, a 7-fold profit, because he told his diary, "I fear to part with the first true prize of my life." The thrill of asymmetry of knowledge, knowing more than the next bidder, became his lifelong addiction. 2. Scholarship versus Commerce, 1890 to 1901. College days. At the University of Pennsylvania, Rosenbach devoured Elizabethan drama, won the Senior Greek Prize, and in 1898 graduated B.S. with honors. Wikipedia. He stayed on as a Harrison Fellow and completed a Ph.D. in 1901 with a dissertation on Spanish sources in Jacobean theatre. Colleagues expected he would seek a chair of literature. Yet in the margins of his dissertation notebook appears the cryptic jotting, "Books may yield more than footnotes. They may yield fortunes." The October 25, 1903 conversion. In the spring of 1903, Uncle Moses Pollock died intestate. Auctioneer Stanislaus Fife Henkels announced that the entire shop, some 80,000 volumes, would be dispersed at 2-day sale. Rosenbach, still wavering between academe and trade, spent the summer cataloguing the estate gratis, half in mourning, half in anticipation. When the gavel finally fell on the 9th to 10th of March 1904, Aby and his elder brother Philip, already a successful frame dealer, bought back most of the stock for $1,000 fronted by family savings. Wikipedia. 7 months later, on 25th of October, 1903, the firm backdated the founding for luck. The brothers affixed a small brass plaque to a walnut desk. The Rosenbach Company. Rare books, manuscripts, works of art. We buy what we like and trust the world will too. Aby, freshly styled Dr. A.S.W. Rosenbach, would hunt. Philip would mind ledgers. 3. Cutting teeth in the auction rooms, 1904 to 1910. First patrons and the Philadelphia Syndicate. Philadelphia millionaires, Clarence S. Bement, industrialist, and Joseph M. Fox, sugar baron, extended credit lines that allowed Rosenbach to bid with dizzying confidence. Wikipedia. Their arrangement was simple. The dealer bought on spec, the patrons cherry-picked. The leftovers went into stock. It was an early example of using patron financing to leverage bidding power and would shape Rosenbach's modus operandi. The baptism of fire at Banks's. New York, 9th January 1905. Auctioneer Bangs, rapping gavel. Lot 1123, The Whole Book of Psalms, Cambridge, 1640. Bidder A, Wall Street voice. 500. Dr. Rosenbach, thin, calm. 7. Bangs. 700 bid. Do I hear 8? Silence. Bangs, louder. Going! Going! Voice from gallery. 8. Rosenbach, without blinking. 1500. The gallery gasps, the gavel falls. Bangs, aside. Young man, hope you've gold behind that bravado. Rosenbach, smiling. Sir, I have books. The anecdote, retold in Books and Bidders, 1927, introduced the public to the 28-year-old as the chap who jumped bids like stairs. Internet Archive. Forging a persona. In London, he soon earned the sobriquet, the terror of the auction room. Paris bookmen dubbed him Le Napoleon des Livres. American reporters preferred Dr. R. Wikipedia. Behind the bravado lay meticulous preparation. Each catalogue annotated for completeness, condition, provenance, and timing. He penciled the maximum he would bid, then tore 10% off at the door to keep greed in check. 4. The Great Finds, Act 1, 1911 to 1920. Between 1911 and 1920, Rosenbach executed a string of acquisitions that shifted the center of gravity in rare book collecting from Britain to the United States. Year trophy purchase context, notes and fate. 1911. Gutenberg Bible, Shuckburgh copy. Sotheby's, bid £2,600. Sold to Henry E. Huntington, cementing Rosenbach as Huntington's agent. 1912. First folio of Shakespeare. Sotheby's. One of more than 30 folios he would handle Wikipedia. 1919. Poe's Tamerlane and Other Poems. Halsey Sale, New York. Paid $15,000. Soon sold to Florence Blumenthal Edgar Allan Poe Society of Baltimore. 1912 do 20. 8 Incunabula for J.P. Morgan Library. Private treaty. Relationship brokered by Belle de Costa Green. Dialectic of risk. Rosenbach loved to preach what he practiced. Buy the best copy of the scarcest book, and time will do the rest. Goodreads. The aphorism justified his perilous habit of borrowing heavily to secure items whose resale was not yet promised. Philip fretted, but the gambles paid. Scene: the telephone that wouldn't ring. Hotel Ritz, London, 14 July 1919. Rosenbach paced Suite 41, awaiting word from New York bankers who were wiring the funds for Tamerlane. His diary records: the minutes grew abominably long. At 2:15, I resolved to bid whether or not the cable arrived, for had I not risked more for lesser dreams? The funds materialized at 1:57 p.m. The bidding opened at 2. He triumphed in 5 minutes. 5. War, flu, and an expanding empire, 1914 to 1919. The Great War curtailed Atlantic travel, but not opportunity. London dealers starved for American dollars. Rosenbach's letters reveal him buying entire inventories, sight unseen, at 40 cents on the pound, shipping them via neutral Dutch ports. By 1918, he ran parallel offices: Walnut Street, Philadelphia, books; Madison Avenue, New York, art and furniture; and a rented desk at Sotheby's. When the influenza pandemic struck and closed reading rooms, Rosenbach mailed lavish, photograph-rich catalogues to collectors furloughed at home. Sales soared. Bement wrote in December 1918, Your damn brochures are more contagious than the influenza. Every time one lands on my desk, I catch another quarto. 6. Climax of installment. 1. The Birds of America. Coup, 1920. On the 17th December, 1920, the New York Historical Society secretly offered its elephant folio copy of Audubon's Birds of America to finance repairs. Rosenbach, tipped off by a curator he had supplied with first editions of Cooper, cabled $12,500 within hours, stipulating anonymity. The set was resold in 1924 to Mrs. Gracia H. Reinhardt for a sum never disclosed but estimated at $80,000. Audubon Society. Reporters hunted for the middleman. One finally cornered Rosenbach outside the Plaza Hotel. Reporter: "Doctor, are you the mysterious purchaser?" Rosenbach, buttoning his gloves: "My dear fellow, mysteries are the oxygen of books. Without them, they perish." The quip made page 2 of the New York Times and burnished the myth of the omniscient dealer. By 1920, A.S.W. Rosenbach was 44, presiding over offices in Philadelphia, New York, and London, with agents who dispatched weekly cables on sleeping lots. He had already handled 8 Gutenberg Bibles, 30-plus first folios, Tamerlane, Birds of America, and scores of Americana rarities. Yet he was only midway through his saga. The Bay Psalm book, the manuscripts of Ulysses and Alice, the founding of the Rosenbach Museum, and the lectern of philanthropic lecture series all lay ahead. As Rosenbach wrote in a 1927 flourish, "I have known men to hazard their fortunes, go long journeys halfway around the world, betray friends, even lie, cheat, and steal, all for the gain of a book." Goodreads. He might have added that he too hazarded heart and health, but unlike most gamblers, he rarely lost. The Golden Decade, 1921 to 1933. Where installment 1 ended in December 1920, Rosenbach was 44, flush with the Audubon coup, and running a transatlantic operation that seemed unstoppable. The next dozen years would prove his most spectacular and most perilous chapter. A giddy spiral from record-setting bids to the brink of insolvency amid the Great Crash, capped by a turn towards scholarship and philanthropy that redefined his legacy. 7. After the Audubon, rearming for a new decade, 1921-1923. Americana is the new El Dorado. Early 1921 found Dr. Rosenbach pacing the tiled lobby of the Ritz Hotel, Piccadilly, telegraphing coded bids, Rosebrook 1, 2, 3, to agents in New York. World War I had drained many titled British families. Heirloom libraries were appearing like low-tide wrecks, he quipped in a note to brother Philip. American plutocrats, meanwhile, demanded books that proclaimed national genius. Shakespeare and Spinoza are admirable, Phil, but the American millionaires have discovered that their own forefathers wrote books. We must arm ourselves accordingly. Armed he was. Between January 1921 and August 1923, he secured, often in private treaty, 7 17th-century New England imprints, including John Eliot's Indian Bible, and shipped them home in tea chests labeled pharmaceutical samples. The tactic foreshadowed his campaign for the Bay Psalm book, still in private hands then, but already the object of his quiet dossiers. The Eldridge-Johnson Alliance. One evening in April 1922, Rosenbach dined at the Waldorf with Eldridge R. Johnson, the Victor talking machine magnate. Watching the shy engineer finger the wineglass stem, Rosenbach said, "Mr. Johnson, you deal in voices. I deal in the pages that outlive them. Let me find you a page fit for all posterity." Johnson laughed and opened a $100,000 line of credit. Within 6 months, Rosenbach delivered Johnson a pristine Kelmscott Chaucer and a clutch of incunabula that dazzled Camden society. The dealer had found another deep pocket. 8. A Manuscript Odyssey. Ulysses comes to Philadelphia, 1924. January 1924, Anderson Galleries, New York. Lot 143 was the complete autograph manuscript of James Joyce's Ulysses from the estate of lawyer-collector John Quinn. Other dealers shrugged. Modernist manuscripts were thought unmarketable. Rosenbach, after nights deciphering Joyce's cramped hand, disagreed. The bidding opened at $400. He entered at $500, then $750. When the gavel hovered at $1,900, he raised a gloved finger. 1975. Silence. Sold. Newspaper headlines mocked the ludicrously small sum. Joyce fumed in Zurich. Joyce cabled, "Sell back immediately for same price, Joyce." Rosenbach's reply was polished ice. "Regret manuscript integral to my personal collection. Might consider corrected proofs." The Rosenbach Museum and Library. Joyce's revenge was a doggerel stanza that rhymed. Rosie Brooke, he bought a book, though he didn't know how to spell it. The spat only burnished Rosenbach's reputation. He had bought modernism's crown jewel for less than a Studebaker. The manuscript remains in Philadelphia to this day, the Rosenbach Museum and Library. 9. Relics, Rhymes, and Risk. 1924. 1926. The Napoleonic Curiosity. That same spring, Rosenbach cabled Maggs Brothers, London, for a curious lot. The Vignali collection of Napoleonic relics, including the Emperor's reputed member. Cost £400, approximately $2,000. Friends gasped. Rosenbach had it mounted in blue Morocco, and in 1927 lent it to New York's Museum of French Art, where Time described it as a maltreated strip of buckskin shoelace. Wikipedia History of Information. At a champagne supper, he lifted the lid of the velvet box. "Gentlemen, Napoleon lost a continent. I salvaged an inch." The stunt proved two things: his flair for publicity and his conviction that any object, if authenticated and well told, could magnetize collectors. The 106,000 Gutenberg, 1926. On the 20th of March, 1926, the Melk Abbey copy of the Gutenberg Bible hit the block. Bidding roared past $80,000. At $105,000, the room fell still. Then Rosenbach raised his catalogue. 6. The Hammer, at $106,000, set a world record. The New Yorker devoted a full column to the drama, noting that Rosenbach's mere interest could lift a lot clear off the table. The New Yorker. Hours later, he wired Huntington. "Secured Melk copy, glorious condition. Stop, kindly remit." Huntington wired back the next day. The profit, roughly $15,000 after commission, a fortune in 1926. 10. Alice and the Wrath of Albion, 1928. In July 1928, Sotheby's offered Lewis Carroll's holograph, Alice's Adventures Underground, kept by Alice Liddell herself for 6 decades. Competition was expected to be fierce but patriotic. The British Museum and Quaritch both bid. Philip, awaiting cables in Madison Avenue, later recalled, "A.B. told me, if Britannia wants her treasure, she must pay her own top sovereign." At £15,200, Quaritch quit. Rosenbach coolly answered £15,400, approximately $77,000, and the hammer fell. London newspapers howled that the national heritage had been spirited off by an American corsair. AliceInWonderland.net, Wikipedia, Inquirer.com. Rosenbach offered the manuscript at cost to the British Museum. Funds could not be raised in time. He sailed home with the red Morocco volume in a leather dispatch case strapped to his wrist. "Handcuffed to Alice," joked a steward. Within a year, he resold it to Eldridge Johnson for $97,000, donating his $20,000 margin to the Free Library of Philadelphia's Children's Book Room to soften the public relations storm. 11. Books and Bidders, the public-facing dealer. 1927. The crescendo of record prices persuaded the dealer to burnish his brand. In late 1927, Atlantic Monthly Press released Books and Bidders, The Adventures of a Bibliophile. Part memoir, part salesman's gospel, it declared, "By the widest margin and the longest pedigree you can afford, time will do the rest." abyr.org. Reviewers love the raconteur who writes catalogues with one hand and history with the other. Orders for the $5 cloth first printing outstripped supply. Rosenbach had turned himself into a literary character, and every mention of his name in the press nudged auction estimates higher. 12. The Carnival of Paper, Jerome Kern's Library, January 1929. Anderson Galleries, 18 East 57th Street, New York, 10 January 1929. The chandeliers glittered over whispers. Jerome Kern's Library, Fielding, Lamb, Austin, stood in mahogany cases. Bidders used discreet finger signals. Prices shot mad as ticker tape, wrote the New Yorker. A Fielding Tom Jones leapt to $48,000, a Burns letter to $8,750. The New Yorker. At the break, a junior dealer hissed, "Dr. R, these sums are lunacy." Rosenbach smiled. "Sir, the tune stops when the fiddler quits. Until then, keep waltzing." Over 9 sessions, the sale realized $1.7 million, the last great splurge before Wall Street cracked. Observers called it the Versailles of bibliomania. 13. Crash, contraction, and a change of heart, 1929, 1931. The bottom drops out. 6 weeks after the final Kern gavel, October 24, 1929, Black Thursday, wiped out millions. By Christmas, the phones at 15 East 57th rang with cancellations. A banker asked Rosenbach to repossess a Gutenberg leaf for ready cash. The dealer's own inventory stood at nearly $2 million cost. His bank credit shrank overnight. "I stare at the shelves and see frozen currency," he wrote Philip. The International League of Antiquarian Booksellers later noted that the 1930s rare book market entered a prolonged depression. The Kern prices looked as foolish as stocks. iLab, N. Rosenbach slashed asking prices 30%, laid off 2 clerks, and nonetheless declined to liquidate the Ulysses or Alice manuscripts. "A prince never sells the crown jewels in a panic," he told confident Lessing Rosenwald. From speculator to steward. Financial shock turned his focus inward. In 1928, just before the crash, he had endowed the A.S.W. Rosenbach Fellowship in Bibliography at the University of Pennsylvania. Now, in 1931, the first Rosenbach lectures were delivered by novelist Christopher Morley, inaugurating what would become America's longest-running bibliographical lecture series. Penn Libraries. At the inaugural reception, Morley toasted, "To Dr. R, who teaches us that knowledge is the only blue-chip security." Rosenbach, glass aloft, replied, "And books its bearer bonds, tarnished in panic, redeemed in patience." 14. Keeping the Flame, 1931, 1933. A new kind of catalogue. Depression-era catalogues shifted tone, less trumpet blast, more scholarship. Catalogue 29, 1932, opened with a 10-page essay on early Pennsylvania German printing, reflecting Rosenbach's growing role as public historian. The Irish Psalter that wasn't. In 1933, he quietly bought from an Irish country parson a 1600 Bay Psalm book variant for £150. Cheap, but incomplete. He tucked it away, noting in pencil, "One day we'll stand beside the better copy we must yet capture." That prophecy would ripen in 1947, but the seed was sown in these lean years. WHYY. 15. Coda to the Decade, a dealer reforged. By New Year's 1934, Rosenbach had survived the storm. Revenues were a third of 1928 levels, yet his reputation had swelled from buccaneer to elder statesman. He had transported modernism's greatest manuscript to American soil, provoked a transatlantic cultural row with his capture of Alice, written the era's best-selling memoir of the trade, watched a market he had helped overheat collapse, and resolved to shore up its scholarly foundations through the lecture series bearing his name. In a letter to Morley, he summed up the lesson. Collecting is the art of wedlock between appetite and intellect. In the 20s, appetite led the dance. In the 30s, intellect must keep the music alive. Legacy in indelible ink, 1934 to 1952 and beyond. Installment 2 closed on New Year's 1934 with A.S.W. Rosenbach chastened by the crash, yet busily reinventing himself as scholar-dealer and public educator. The final stretch of his life would fuse commerce, wartime patriotism, record-shattering coups, and the slow, deliberate creation of a permanent institution to outlive him. 16. From Buccaneer to Bibliographer, 1934–1936. The Depression years forced Rosenbach to replace thunderous price tags with scholarship's quieter music. On 22nd October 1934, he addressed the American Antiquarian Society in Worcester. His paper, The Libraries of the Presidents of the United States, opened with a provocation. Measure a president's greatness by his shelves, for thoughts ungathered between boards perish like dew. AmericanAntiquarian.org. The audience of staid historians chuckled, then furiously took notes as Rosenbach paraded anecdotes. Washington annotating agriculture treatises, Lincoln pressing campaign pamphlets between law books. The talk marked his passage from fearless bidder to acknowledged historian of the book. Back in Philadelphia, he spent winter nights revising the lecture for publication, his housekeeper noting, "Lamplight under the study door past 3. He mailed complimentary off-prints to 200 clients. Scholarship, yes, but also marketing slyly disguised as civic history. 17. Books for Breadlines. The 1938 Refugee Auction. Storm clouds over Europe stirred Rosenbach's conscience and his flair for spectacle. On the 8th of December 1938, the ballroom of New York's Plaza Hotel glittered under crystal chandeliers for a one-night auction to aid Jewish war sufferers and Christian refugees. Christopher Morley, Major Bowes, and columnist Dorothy Thompson took turns at the rostrum while Rosenbach stalked the floor, whispering increments to nervous donors. Wikipedia. A Dickens manuscript fetched $2,000. A Lincoln autograph, $1,400. By midnight, the tally stood at $35,000. The press called it breadlines fed by first editions. Reporters quoted Rosenbach's closing flourish. Tonight, we have proved that a single leaf of paper can shelter a family, that ink can purchase bread. Wikipedia. The line raced by wire services across America, reminding the public that books could be tools of mercy, not mere trophies. 18. Wartime Years, Atlantic. Narrowed to a Cable, 1939–1945. Suspension of travel, not of trade. When Hitler's troops crossed Poland, transatlantic liners were requisitioned. Rosenbach's passport gathered dust. "My eyes must voyage by catalogue," he wrote Philip. London partners cabled descriptions, sometimes in verse, to elude censors. Midsummer folio, leaves unshorn, gilt spirit still bright. Liquidating the past to fund the future. In December 1942, the brothers staged 2 marathons at Park Bernay, 700 lots of English and French furniture, Georgian silver and paintings. It was a public farewell to the firm's decorative arts sideline. The catalogue stressed proceeds would strengthen book operations exclusively. Hidden City, Philadelphia, Biblio. War will end, Words will remain, Rosenbach told New York Herald Tribune. I would rather hold a pamphlet printed in 1643 than a chaise longue carved in 1743. Hidden City, Philadelphia. The sale realized $210,000, working capital for wartime book purchases executed sight unseen. One such gamble, a parcel of early American imprints from a Glasgow dealer, contained a pristine 1663 Cambridge platform, later flipped to the Library of Congress at triple cost. Quiet patriotism. Unable to enlist, Rosenbach assisted the Office of War Information by authenticating seized Nazi-looted incunabula. His marginalia, Berlin stamp suspect, verify, Hein no, collated perfect, still mask reference copies in the National Archives. Though unpublicized, the service enhanced his standing with librarians post-1945. 19. The Bay, Psalm Book Coup, January 28, 1947. By war's end, Rosenbach eyed a quarry whispered about since his teens, the Bay Psalm Book of 1640, America's first printed book. Only 11 copies survived. The Gertrude Vanderbilt Whitney Trust planned a single-lot auction at Park Benay. The Yale University Library empowered him to bid up to $105,000. On the catalogue's flyleaf, he penciled, Yale Max, 105, my nerve, 140. The sale room overflowed with newsreel cameras. Bidding opened at $30,000 and rocketed. At $150,000, only Rosenbach and Cornelius Vanderbilt Whitney remained. Auctioneer, 150,000. Do I hear 151? Whitney, after pause, 151. Rosenbach, instantly, 151 and 1/2. Laughter rippled. Whitney folded. The gavel fell at $151,000, a world record. Fine Books Magazine, Sotheby's.com, The New Yorker. Trouble followed. Yale's provost balked at the overbid. Rosenbach wired tersely, perfection often costs a premium. Trust my judgment or relinquish. Alumni rallied. Within 8 months, donors closed the gap, and the Psalm book entered Yale's Banneker Library. rarebookhub.com. The New Yorker mused, Dr. R has once more paid tomorrow's price today, and made it look inevitable. The New Yorker. 20 times Dr. R and Mr. Lilly, A Courtship of Checkbooks, 1930 to 1951. While the Psalm book drama seized headlines, another, quieter saga had unfolded for 2 decades. Rosenbach's mentorship of Josiah K. Lilly Jr., pharmaceutical scion and budding bibliophile. Lilly's first timid order in 1930, a set of Hakluyt's Voyages, arrived with a handwritten note. May this be the seed of a forest. By the 1940s, Rosenbach dispatched monthly bulletins to Indianapolis. Rose Lil 27, 6 Burns MSS, advise prompt. Lilly's responses were wire transfers. Scholars later counted over 2,000 items that passed through the Rosenbach ledger into what became the Lilly Library at Indiana University. blogs.libraries.indiana.edu. At a 1951 luncheon, Lilly toasted, "To the man who turned my allowance into an endowment of ink." Rosenbach replied, eyes twinkling, "I am only the stage manager. The play is yours." 21. Toward Permanence, the Rosenbach Foundation, 1950. Years of lecturing convinced Rosenbach that private passions should become public trust. On May 15, 1950, the brothers signed articles of incorporation for the Philip H. and A.S.W. Rosenbach Foundation, endowed with their townhouse at 2008-10 Delancey Place and an initial portfolio of 4,000 choice books and manuscripts. Wikipedia. The charter pledged to foster interest in books, paintings, and other works of art, and to advance scholarship. It also mandated that the founder's private library remain kept in domestic character, allowing visitors to handle the banister worn by Rosenbach's own hand. Philip, ever the realist, asked, "Can we afford sentiment?" Aby tapped the vellum spine of a Caxton Chronicles. "We cannot afford oblivion." 22. Final Campaigns, Fading Health, 1951–1952. Rosenbach's last year was a paradox of waning strength and undimmed ambition. In March 1951, he secured for $45,000 39 pages of the autographed manuscript of Dickens's Nicholas Nickleby, manoeuvring past a London banker who arrived 2 minutes late. ProQuest. He planned a magnum opus exhibition, Origins of American Printing, but angina curtailed travel. Assistants reported receiving index card directives initialed ASWR in shaky script. "Please mount Eliot Indian Bible next to Bay Psalm," place map of Cambridge Press opposite. On the 30th of June 1952, he collapsed in his study, a first folio open on the desk. He died early 1 July 1952, aged 75. Obituaries hailed the greatest bookman since Bodley, the P.T. Barnum of bibliography, and his favourite, the greatest bookman since Bodley, the P.T. Barnum of bibliography, and his favourite, the man who taught America to value her own ink, Wikipedia. Philip followed 9 months later. The townhouse lights dimmed, but not for long. 23. Afterlife of a Legend, 1953–2025. Opening the doors. On the 2nd of June 1954, the Rosenbach Museum and Library opened to the public. Visitors queued under elms on Delancey Place to glimpse Joyce's scrawl, Lewis Carroll's Red Morocco Alice, and a handwritten limerick lampooning Rosenbach himself. A docent recalled a child tugging her sleeve. Did Dr. R. live here with all these stories? The Rosenbach Museum and Library. Lectures, loans, and living collections. The Foundation continued the Rosenbach Lectures, now the longest-running bibliographical series in the U.S., and lent treasures to institutions from the British Library to the National Museum of African American History, Wikipedia. Mergers and milestones. In 2013, the museum formally affiliated with the Free Library of Philadelphia, uniting public holdings that Rosenbach had nurtured as a board member for 3 decades. WHYY. In exhibition labels and auction catalogues alike, the phrase ex Rosenbach remains a badge of provenance that can nudge a hammer price upward, the dealer's invisible signature. But numbers merely footnote the larger legacy. Rosenbach democratized rare book collecting in America, mentoring industrialists, librarians, and schoolchildren alike to see value not only in Shakespeare but in the earliest hymnals, campaign broadsides, and slave narrative pamphlets of the United States. Christopher Morley once wrote that Rosenbach built invisible cathedrals out of paper. The foundation on Delancey Place ensures those cathedrals remain open, their stained glass leaves luminous under careful light. Asked once why he never wrote a full autobiography, Rosenbach winked, "My life is already indexed in the auction catalogues." So it is, but behind those terse entries lies the drama you have now read, the gambler's nerves, the scholar's footnotes, the showman's timing, and, above all, the abiding love of the written word.